I watched my sister Elena slip the engagement ring onto her finger, the massive diamond catching the light from the crystal chandelier above. Her perfectly manicured nails, paid for with money she'd stolen from me, trembled with excitement as she admired the 3-carat stone. "Oh, Marcus, it's absolutely perfect," she gushed, throwing her arms around her fiancé. Marcus Rothwell, the supposed oil heir worth $200 million, smiled that charming smile that had fooled everyone in our family, everyone except me, because I was the one who hired him. "Nothing but the best for my future wife," Marcus said, his voice carrying that practiced Texas drawl that had taken him weeks to perfect. He caught my eye over Elena's shoulder and gave me the subtlest of nods. Phase 1 was complete. Our parents applauded from their seats in the private dining room of Le Bernardin, Mom actually wiping away tears of joy. Our Elena, engaged to an oil baron. I always knew she'd make something of herself. The irony was delicious. In exactly 6 months, Marcus would disappear with every penny Elena had, plus the $2 million she'd somehow convinced our parents to invest in his fictional oil venture. She'd be left bankrupt, humiliated, and alone, just as she'd left me in my previous life. Yes, my previous life. Because I'd been here before, lived through this exact scenario, except last time I was the one being destroyed. This time, I was the architect of justice. Elena turned to me, her green eyes sparkling with malicious triumph. She thought she was winning. She thought she'd successfully stolen my inheritance, my business, and my identity. And now she was marrying into wealth while I scraped by as her disowned sister. "Isn't he wonderful, Sarah?" she cooed, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I'm so lucky. Some people just have all the luck, I suppose." I smiled back, matching her saccharine tone. "You absolutely deserve everything that's coming to you, Elena. Everything." The double meaning wasn't lost on her, but she misinterpreted it entirely. Her smile widened, thinking I was conceding defeat. Poor, stupid Elena. She had no idea that her beloved Marcus had already photographed every document she'd shown him, copied every password she'd shared, and documented every crime she'd bragged about during their pillow talk. "When's the wedding?" Dad asked, cutting into his Wagyu beef with the same precision he'd once used to cut me out of his will. "June," Marcus replied smoothly. "I want to give Elena the wedding of her dreams. Money's no object, of course." Of course not. He was spending the advance I'd paid him from the $15 million I'd earned building my tech company, the same company Elena had stolen from me in my first life through forged documents and parental manipulation. The same $15 million she thought had vanished when I'd supposedly died in that convenient car accident. But I hadn't died, not really. The last thing I remembered from my first life was Elena's face, twisted with satisfaction as she watched the paramedics load my broken body into the ambulance. She'd tampered with my brakes, I'd figured out later, much later. She'd killed me for money, for status, for the pure joy of winning. Then I'd woken up in my childhood bedroom on my 18th birthday, 7 years in the past, with every memory intact. 7 years to plan the perfect revenge. "Sarah, you're so quiet," Mom observed, though her tone suggested this was more criticism than concern. "Aren't you happy for your sister?" "Ecstatic," I replied, raising my wine glass. "To Elena and Marcus, may you get everything you deserve." We toasted, and I caught Marcus fighting back a smirk. He was good. I'd chosen well. The best con artist money could buy, with a specialty in long-term romantic fraud. He'd spent months studying Elena's psychological profile, her weaknesses, her desires. He knew exactly how to make her fall so hard she'd ignore every red flag. Not that Elena was particularly observant. Greed made people stupid, and Elena had always been greedy. As the dinner continued, I let my mind drift back to how this all began. How I'd spent the first year after my rebirth, simply observing, documenting every cruel thing my family did, every way they'd betrayed me before. I'd used that year to plan, to prepare, and to disappear certain assets before Elena could steal them again. The second year, I'd built my company in secret, using a false identity and offshore accounts. The third year, I'd made my first $100 million and started planning Elena's downfall in earnest. It had taken 4 years to find Marcus, train him, and set up the elaborate con that would destroy her, but it would be worth it, because this time, when the dust settled, I would be the one left standing. I have some news too, Elena announced suddenly, her voice cutting through my reverie. Marcus and I have decided to start a joint business venture. He's putting up the initial capital, of course, but I'll be handling all the day-to-day operations. What kind of business? Dad asked, leaning forward with interest. He'd always been fascinated by Elena's schemes, even when they involved destroying his other daughter. A luxury real estate development, Marcus answered. Elena's going to oversee a new resort in the Maldives. She has such exquisite taste. I nearly choked on my wine. Exquisite taste in theft, maybe. The resort was fictional, of course, but Elena would spend months developing it, using Marcus's money to fund a lavish lifestyle while believing she was building her empire. When it all collapsed, she'd have nothing left to show for it but unpaid bills and broken dreams. That sounds wonderful, I said aloud. I'm sure Elena will put everything she has into it. I will, Elena agreed, completely missing the threat. I'm going to pour my heart and soul into this project, all my resources. This is going to make us rich beyond our wildest dreams. Rich beyond her wildest dreams, certainly, but not in the way she expected. As the evening wound down, Marcus excused himself to take a business call. I followed him to the restaurant's lobby, keeping my distance. How's she taking the bait? I asked quietly when he returned. Like a starving fish, he replied, his Texas accent completely gone now. She's already talking about liquidating some investments to contribute to the startup costs. The wedding planning is also going exactly as expected. She wants the most expensive everything. Good. Remember, the key is making her feel like she's in control while you slowly drain everything she has. She needs to believe she's the mastermind. Don't worry, Marcus said, straightening his tie. By the time I'm done, she won't have enough left to buy a candy bar. Your sister is about to learn what real consequences feel like. I nodded, satisfied. Phase 2 could begin. But first, I needed to tell you how I got here. How a spoiled, wealthy daughter became a twice-lived woman with nothing left to lose and everything to gain. It started, as most family betrayals do, with inheritance. My grandfather, Thomas Chen, had built a technology empire from nothing. When he died, he left everything to me. Not because I was the favorite, but because I was the only one who'd shown any interest in actually running the company. Elena had been too busy shopping and partying. My parents had been too busy enabling her. The will was clear. I inherited the company, the family fortune, everything. Elena got a trust fund that would keep her comfortable but not wealthy. My parents got their house and enough money to maintain their lifestyle. It should have been simple. It would have been simple if Elena hadn't been Elena. I was 22 when Grandpa died, fresh out of MIT with a computer science degree and ready to take over Chen Technologies. I had plans, big plans. I wanted to expand into artificial intelligence, renewable energy, space technology. The company was positioned perfectly for the next technological revolution. Elena was 25 and had never held a job in her life. The reading of the will took place in our family lawyer's office on a gray October morning. I'll never forget the look on Elena's face when she realized she wasn't getting the company. Pure, undiluted rage mixed with disbelief. There has to be a mistake, she said, her voice rising. I'm the eldest. I should inherit everything. The lawyer, Mr. Patterson, adjusted his glasses and read the relevant passage again. Thomas Chen was very clear in his wishes. The company goes to Sarah, along with 70% of his liquid assets. Elena receives a trust fund valued at $5 million to be dispersed monthly over her lifetime. $5 million. Most people would kill for that kind of security. But Elena had always measured her worth against mine, and in her mind, she was being robbed. The next few months passed in a blur of legal challenges, family meetings, and increasingly desperate attempts by Elena to contest the will. She hired lawyers, she threatened to sue, she even tried to seduce Patterson, unsuccessfully, to get him to find a more recent will. Nothing worked. The will was ironclad, and Grandpa had been very much of sound mind when he wrote it, so Elena changed tactics. It started with small things. Documents going missing from my office, meetings being rescheduled without my knowledge, key employees suddenly leaving for better offers. I thought it was just the chaos of taking over a large company, the normal growing pains of transitioning leadership. I should have known better. Elena had never accepted defeat gracefully. The first major blow came 6 months after I took over. Our biggest client, Henderson Industries, suddenly canceled a $50 million contract, claiming I'd failed to deliver promised specifications. When I reviewed the contract, I found clauses I'd never agreed to, impossible deadlines I'd never set, penalties that made no sense. Someone had altered the contract after I'd signed it. I don't understand, I told Patterson when I brought the issue to him. These aren't the terms I agreed to. Someone changed them. Patterson examined the document carefully. Sarah, this is your signature. Are you saying you didn't read the contract before signing it? I stared at the papers in disbelief. It was my signature, perfect in every detail. But I knew I'd never signed those terms. Someone forged this. They had to have. That's a serious accusation. Do you have any proof? I didn't. The original contract had vanished from my files, and Henderson Industries claimed they'd only ever received the version they were canceling over. Without evidence, I looked like an incompetent CEO trying to blame others for my mistakes. The second blow came a month later. A brilliant young engineer I'd been mentoring, David Kim, resigned abruptly to start his own company. He took 3 of our best programmers with him and somehow secured funding to develop a project nearly identical to one we'd been working on. A project only family members knew about. How did David learn about Project Prometheus? I asked Elena over dinner at our parents' house. That was classified information. Elena shrugged, cutting into her salmon with deliberate precision. I have no idea. Maybe he's just smart. Maybe he figured it out on his own. Elena, I kept my voice level, professional. Did you tell David about Prometheus? Why would I do that? Her green eyes were wide with innocence. I don't even understand all that technical stuff you do. But she was lying. I could see it in the way she avoided my gaze, the slight tremor in her voice. Elena had always been a terrible liar, except when she was lying to people who wanted to believe her. The third blow nearly finished me. My CFO, Janet Morrison, came to me on a Tuesday morning with documents showing massive financial irregularities. Money was missing from several accounts, transfers had been made without authorization, and somehow my personal signing authority had been used to approve expenditures I'd never seen. Sarah, I need to ask you directly, Janet said, her face grave. Are you embezzling from your own company? The accusation hit me like a physical blow. What? Janet, of course not. Why would I steal from myself? I don't know, but the evidence is pretty clear. Look at these transactions. She spread the papers across my desk. Your digital signature is on all of them. Either you're embezzling or someone has perfectly replicated your signing process. I studied the documents, my heart sinking. Every signature was perfect. Every authorization looked legitimate. But I hadn't signed any of these. I wouldn't have. Several of the expenditures made no business sense whatsoever. Janet, I swear to you, I didn't authorize any of these transactions. Someone is framing me. She looked at me with something approaching pity. Sarah, I've known you since you were 16. I want to believe you. But you need to explain how someone could have gained access to your personal signing credentials, your office, your private accounts. I couldn't. Because the only people with that level of access were family members. That night, I stayed late at the office, going through every security log, every access record, every digital footprint I could find. What I discovered made my blood run cold. Elena's keycard had been used to access my office after hours at least 20 times in the past 3 months. The security cameras showed her entering my workspace, but conveniently, they'd all malfunctioned during the crucial moments when she would have been accessing my computer or filing cabinets. I had proof. Finally, I had proof. I called an emergency board meeting for the next morning, prepared to present evidence that Eliana was sabotaging the company. I spent all night preparing my presentation, organizing documents, building an airtight case. I never got to present it. That morning, as I drove to the office, my brakes failed on the steep descent into downtown. My car careened off the road through a guardrail and down a 40-foot embankment. The last thing I saw before everything went black was Elena standing on the bridge above, watching my car burn. Then I woke up in my childhood bedroom, 7 years younger, with a second chance at life. And this time, I knew exactly who my enemies were. The first few days after my rebirth were disorienting. I kept expecting to see Janet Morrison walk through my door or to find Elena rifling through my office. Instead, I found myself back in my parents' house, preparing for my senior year of college, with Elena still playing the role of the innocent older sister. But I knew better now. I knew what she was capable of, what she would do given the opportunity. More importantly, I knew how to stop her. The key was understanding Elena's psychology. She wasn't evil for evil's sake. She was desperately insecure beneath her confident exterior. She'd spent her entire life being compared to me, the smart one, the responsible one, the one Grandpa actually talked to about business. Eliana had always been beautiful, popular, charming, but in a family that valued achievement over appearance, she'd always felt like she came in second place. Inheriting the company wasn't really about money for Elena. It was about finally proving she was the better daughter, the one who deserved Dad's respect and Mom's pride. When Grandpa left everything to me, it confirmed her worst fears about herself. That insecurity made her predictable. I knew she'd strike at my reputation, my relationships, my sense of self-worth. She'd try to prove I didn't deserve what I'd inherited by systematically destroying my ability to manage it, so this time, I wouldn't give her the chance. Instead of returning to MIT for my final semester, I deferred my graduation and started building something Elena could never steal, a completely separate identity. Using false documents I'd purchased through contacts I'd made during my years running Chen Technologies, I created a persona named Victoria Zhang. Victoria was a mysterious tech entrepreneur who operated through offshore companies and anonymous investments. She had no connection to the Chen family, no traceable history, and more importantly, no way for Elena to find her. As Victoria, I started a small software development company focused on mobile applications. I used my knowledge from my previous life to develop apps that I knew would become popular, investing the profits in cryptocurrency and emerging technologies. Within 6 months, Victoria Zhang was worth $10 million. Elena, meanwhile, was completely unaware that her little sister had become a secret millionaire. I graduated MIT on schedule, returned home to take over Chen Technologies when Grandpa died, and watched Elena begin her campaign of sabotage exactly as she had before. But this time, I was ready. Every time Elena stole a document, I had backups. Every time she bribed an employee to quit, I had replacements already hired through Victoria's network. Every time she tried to sabotage a contract, I had contingency plans in place that she couldn't understand how I was always one step ahead. It frustrated her, made her sloppy. She started taking bigger risks, leaving more evidence behind. The beauty of having lived through her betrayal once was that I knew exactly what she would do before she did it. When she approached David Kim about leaving the company, I was already recording their conversations. When she gained access to my accounts, I had already moved all the real money and left decoy transactions for her to discover. By the time she arranged my accident, I had already faked my own death. The car crash was real. I'd hired a professional stuntman to stage it convincingly. But I jumped out safely before the car went over the embankment, while Elena watched from the bridge, believing she'd finally won. The funeral was beautiful, I heard. Elena gave a touching eulogy about her beloved sister, crocodile tears streaming down her face. She inherited Chen Technologies, as expected, and promptly ran it into the ground within 18 months through sheer incompetence. Meanwhile, Victoria Zhang's business empire grew to include everything from software development to renewable energy investments. I was worth over $100 million and completely invisible to my family, but money wasn't enough. Elena needed to pay for what she'd done. Not just to me, but to the employees she'd destroyed, the dreams she'd crushed, the life she'd stolen. That's when I started planning her real punishment. I spent 2 years studying Elena's new life as a supposedly wealthy heiress. She'd maintained the fiction that Chen Technologies was still successful, taking out massive loans against future profits that would never materialize. She lived in an expensive penthouse, drove luxury cars, wore designer clothes, all on borrowed money that would eventually come due. She was also desperately lonely. Success hadn't brought her happiness, just a mounting pile of debt and the constant fear that someone would discover her failures. She'd had a series of failed relationships, each ending when men realized she wasn't as wealthy as she pretended to be. Elena needed a man who would accept her financial instability, someone who seemed wealthy enough that her own poverty wouldn't matter. She needed someone who would make her feel special, chosen, worthy of love despite her failures. She needed Marcus Rothwell. I found Marcus through a network of high-end con artists who specialized in romance fraud. His real name was Michael Rodriguez, and he was a former actor who'd turned to criminal enterprises after his theater career failed. He was brilliant, charming, and utterly without conscience when it came to wealthy women who thought they could buy love. Perfect for Elena. It took 6 months to train Marcus in Elena's specific psychology, to teach him exactly how to make her fall in love. We studied her dating history, her social media posts, her deepest insecurities. By the time he approached her at that charity gala last year, he knew her better than she knew herself. The courtship was a masterpiece of manipulation. Marcus played hard to get just enough to make Elena chase him. He claimed to be new money, slightly embarrassed by his wealth, looking for a woman who could love him for himself rather than his bank account. He was everything Elena needed him to be: successful enough to validate her worth, humble enough not to threaten her ego, and mysterious enough to keep her interested. Eliana fell completely, utterly in love. And now, 6 months later, she was engaged to marry a man who was going to destroy her life with the same systematic precision she'd once used to destroy mine. The irony was delicious, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. The engagement party was just the beginning of Elena's downfall. The real show was about to start. Over the following weeks, Marcus began the delicate process of integrating himself into Elena's financial life. As her fiancé, he needed access to her accounts for wedding planning, joint investments, shared business ventures. Elena, blinded by love and greed, gave him everything he asked for. "I want us to be completely transparent with each other," she told him one evening as they reviewed bank statements in her penthouse. "No secrets between us." "Of course, darling," Marcus replied, photographing every document with a hidden camera. Complete transparency. Elena had approximately $4 million in various accounts, money she'd borrowed against Chen Technologies' phantom assets, plus what remained of her trust fund. It wasn't nearly as much as she'd led Marcus to believe, but it was enough for our purposes. The first phase of the con involved the fictional Maldives resort. Marcus presented Eliana with official-looking development documents, architectural plans, and investment prospectuses for a luxury eco-resort that existed only in carefully crafted digital mock-ups. The initial investment required was $2 million, conveniently exactly half of Elena's available funds. "This is our chance to build something beautiful together," Marcus told her, his eyes shining with false sincerity. "A legacy that will last forever." Elena was practically glowing as she signed the investment documents. She thought she was being clever, strategic, building a business empire with her wealthy fiancé. She had no idea she was signing away her future. The second phase involved the wedding planning. Marcus insisted on paying for everything, of course, but suggested that Elena contribute by handling all the logistics and vendor payments. He would transfer money to her accounts, and she would manage the expenses. "I trust you completely with the details," he said. "You have such exquisite taste. I want our wedding to be perfect." The wedding budget ballooned quickly. Elena, intoxicated by the idea of spending someone else's money on her dream event, spared no expense. Custom Vera Wang dress, flowers flown in from Ecuador, a private orchestra, a 7-course meal designed by a Michelin-starred chef. The total cost reached $800,000. Marcus transferred the money as promised, but what Elena didn't know was that every payment came from accounts I controlled. She was spending my money on her own elaborate funeral. The third phase was the most psychologically devastating. Marcus began pulling away emotionally, creating doubt and insecurity right when Elena needed him most. "I'm worried about some irregularities in the resort development," he told her during what should have been a romantic dinner. "There might be some legal complications. I may need to withdraw my investment." Elena's face went white. "What kind of complications?" "Environmental permits, local government issues. Nothing insurmountable, but it could delay the project significantly. I might need that $2 million back to cover legal fees." "But Marcus, I've already spent that money on wedding planning and other investments. I can't just get it back immediately." I understand, darling, but this is business. Sometimes we have to make hard choices. The doubt crept into Elena's voice. Are you having second thoughts about us? Of course not, Marcus said, but his tone was cooler now, more distant. I just need to know that you're as committed to our success as I am. This is a test, Elena. Are you my partner, or are you just another woman looking for a rich husband? Elena spent the next few weeks frantically trying to liquidate assets, calling in favors, borrowing against future earnings that didn't exist. She managed to scrape together another $1 million, which she immediately transferred to Marcus for the legal complications. She thought she was proving her devotion. Actually, she was signing her own bankruptcy papers. By this point, I was monitoring every move through Marcus's hidden cameras and my own surveillance network. Elena was hemorrhaging money, her stress levels were through the roof, and she was starting to question everything about her relationship. Perfect. It was time for phase 4, the revelation. I arranged for Elena to accidentally discover that Marcus had been meeting with other women. The evidence was carefully planted. Receipts from romantic dinners, text messages on his phone, jewelry purchases that weren't for her. Elena's paranoia, already heightened by months of financial stress, exploded into full-blown hysteria. Who is she? Elena screamed at Marcus during their confrontation, waving the incriminating receipts. Who are you buying jewelry for? Elena, you're being ridiculous, Marcus replied, his performance flawless. These are business dinners. The jewelry is for you. I was planning to surprise you. Don't lie to me. I know you're seeing someone else. I can feel it. You're different, distant. You're pulling away from me. Maybe I am, Marcus said quietly, delivering the killing blow. Maybe I'm realizing that this relationship isn't what I thought it was. Maybe I'm seeing who you really are. What do you mean? Elena, you've been lying to me about your finances from the beginning. The trust fund, the company inheritance, the family wealth, none of it is real, is it? You're broke. The accusation hit Elena like a physical blow. Her carefully constructed lies were collapsing around her, and she had no defense. That's not true, she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. I had you investigated, Marcus continued, his voice growing colder. Chen Technologies is bankrupt. Your trust fund is depleted. You've been living on borrowed money and credit for years. You thought you could trick me into marrying you for my money? Elena's face crumpled as the full weight of her exposure crashed down on her. She'd been found out, caught in her web of lies by the man she loved. Marcus, please, let me explain. There's nothing to explain, Marcus said, standing up and straightening his jacket. The engagement is off. The wedding is canceled. I'll be taking back my investments, of course. You can't. I've already spent that money. Then you'll have to find a way to pay me back, all of it. $3 million, Elena, with interest. As Marcus walked out of Elena's life, she collapsed onto her couch, sobbing hysterically. In the space of an hour, she'd lost her fiancé, her financial security, and her last shred of dignity. But I wasn't finished with her yet. The final phase of Elena's destruction began the next morning when she discovered that Marcus had withdrawn every penny from their joint accounts before leaving. The wedding vendors were calling, demanding payment for services already rendered. The resort investment had vanished into non-existent offshore accounts. Her credit cards were maxed out, her loans were being called in, and the bank was threatening foreclosure on her penthouse. Elena was ruined, completely and utterly bankrupt. In desperation, she tried to contact Marcus, but his phone was disconnected. The oil company he claimed to work for had no record of anyone by that name. The address she had for him turned out to be a vacant office space. Marcus Rothwell had never existed. Elena hired private investigators, lawyers, anyone who would take her case on contingency. But Marcus had covered his tracks too well. Every document was forged. Every reference was fake. Every trail led to dead ends. She'd been conned by a ghost. The investigation revealed the full scope of her financial devastation. Elena owed over $5 million to various creditors, had no legitimate income source, and no way to repay any of it. Chen Technologies was about to be liquidated to cover its debts, leaving her with no assets whatsoever. She was forced to declare bankruptcy, sell everything she owned, and move back in with our parents. The same parents who were now questioning every decision they'd ever made about their daughters. How could you be so stupid, Elena? Dad shouted during one particularly ugly confrontation. How could you fall for such an obvious con? I loved him, Elena sobbed. I thought he loved me too. Love doesn't make you hand over millions of dollars to a stranger, Mom said, her voice cold with disappointment. We trusted you with your inheritance, and you've lost everything. Everything. Elena tried to blame Marcus, the economy, bad luck, anything but her own greed and stupidity. But the truth was undeniable. She'd destroyed herself through the same arrogance and poor judgment that had once destroyed me. The poetic justice was beautiful, but I still had one more surprise for Elena. 6 months after Marcus disappeared, Elena received a package with no return address. Inside was a single document, the deed to Chen Technologies, legally transferred to Victoria Zhang, me, along with a note explaining that Victoria was now Elena's creditor for the full amount of her bankruptcy debts. Elena would spend the rest of her life working to pay off money she owed to her dead sister. The note was signed simply, "Justice is served, S." Elena called my parents, screaming about impossible coincidences and demanding they investigate Victoria Zhang. But what could they do? Sarah Chen was dead, buried in Graceland Cemetery with a beautiful headstone Elena herself had chosen. Victoria Zhang was a legitimate businesswoman with no connection to their family. The official story was that Victoria had purchased Chen Technologies' assets during bankruptcy proceedings and had decided to keep Elena as a debtor rather than writing off her losses. It was perfectly legal, completely above board, and absolutely devastating to Elena's psyche. She knew, on some level, that this wasn't a coincidence. She knew she was being punished by forces she couldn't understand or fight. But she could never prove it, and she could never escape it. Elena spent the next 2 years working menial jobs, living in a studio apartment, watching every penny. All of her income beyond basic survival expenses went directly to Victoria Zhang to pay down her crushing debts. She would never own anything again, never feel secure again, never trust anyone again. Meanwhile, I expanded my business empire under the Victoria Zhang identity. I bought back the family house when my parents could no longer afford it, purchased Elena's favorite art pieces at auction for pennies on the dollar, and donated generously to charities Elena had once supported. Everything Elena had ever wanted, I now owned. The beauty of the revenge was its permanence. Elena couldn't declare bankruptcy again for another 8 years, couldn't escape her debts, couldn't start over with a clean slate. She was trapped in a cage of her own making, paying for her crimes every single day, and I was free. Free to build the empire I'd always dreamed of, free to help people Elena had hurt, free to live the life she'd stolen from me. Some people might say I went too far, that the punishment exceeded the crime. But those people never lived through what Elena did to me. They never felt the betrayal of being murdered by family, never experienced the hopelessness of watching everything they'd built crumble through calculated sabotage. Elena didn't just steal my money or my company. She stole my life, my relationships, my future. She took everything from me and left me to die alone and forgotten. So I took everything from her and left her to live alone and forgotten. The difference is I gave her something she never gave me, the chance to earn redemption through honest work. Whether she takes that chance is up to her. As I write this, 3 years have passed since Elena's engagement party. I'm now worth over $500 million, running a technology empire that spans 3 continents. I've revolutionized renewable energy storage, developed breakthrough artificial intelligence applications, and funded medical research that will save thousands of lives. I've also been in a loving relationship for the past year with Dr. Amanda Foster, a brilliant oncologist who has no idea about my complicated family history. We met at a medical research conference where I was announcing a $50 million donation to cancer research. She approached me afterward to discuss partnership opportunities, and I fell in love with her passion for helping others. Amanda thinks Victoria Zhang is an orphan who built her fortune through careful investments and technological innovation. It's not entirely false. I did build my fortune through innovation. And in many ways, the Chen family did kill the old Sarah, leaving Victoria to rise from her ashes. Elena, meanwhile, is still working as a bookkeeper at a small accounting firm in Queens. She lives in the same studio apartment, drives the same 15-year-old Honda Civic, eats ramen noodles for dinner most nights. Every month, she sends 70% of her income to Victoria Jang, slowly chipping away at a debt that will take her decades to repay. She's also been going to therapy, something I know because I still monitor her life through discreet surveillance. The therapist is helping her understand the psychological roots of her narcissistic behavior, the deep insecurity that drove her to such desperate measures. I'm genuinely glad she's getting help. Revenge was never about making Elena suffer forever. It was about making her understand the consequences of her choices, making her live with the same fear and powerlessness she'd forced on me. In her therapy sessions, Elena talks about feeling haunted by her dead sister, about sensing Sarah's presence in the coincidences that destroyed her life. She's not wrong. I am haunting her, but not with malice, with justice. The therapist asks Elena what she thinks Sarah would want for her now. Elena always gives the same answer. She'd want me to suffer. She'd want me to pay for what I did. But that's where Elena is wrong. What I want now is for her to become a better person than she was. I want her to understand that actions have consequences, that other people's lives matter, that love and respect can't be bought or stolen. They have to be earned. If Elena can learn those lessons, if she can genuinely change and make amends for the harm she caused, then maybe someday I'll consider reducing her debt. Maybe someday I'll let Sarah Chen's ghost rest in peace, but that day hasn't come yet. Elena still blames everyone but herself for her downfall. She still sees herself as the victim of circumstances rather than the architect of her own destruction. She still believes that life owes her something instead of recognizing what she owes others. Until Elena learns to take responsibility for her choices, until she proves she's capable of genuine empathy and change, Victoria Zhang will continue collecting payments on a debt that represents more than money. It represents justice for every life Elena destroyed in her quest for power. Some debts can never be fully repaid. Some sins require a lifetime of atonement. But everyone deserves the chance to try. Even Elena. As for me, I'm finally at peace. I have everything I ever wanted. A successful business, financial security, a loving relationship, and the satisfaction of knowing that justice was served. I sleep well at night knowing that Elena will never hurt anyone the way she hurt me, because she'll never have the power to do so again. The girl who died in that car crash 7 years ago can finally rest. Victoria Zhang is living the life Sarah Chen was meant to have, and Elena is paying the price Sarah Chen never got to collect. Some might call it revenge. I call it balance. And sometimes balance looks exactly like justice. The cycle is complete, the scales are even, and the dead can finally find peace. Elena has everything she deserves, and so do I. The only difference is I deserve much more than she does, and I finally have it.